Today we're going to be talking about the due diligence period from both the buyer side and the seller side. Hey guys, I'm Kristen Coleman, real estate agent with Georgia Perimeter Homes. Thank you for tuning in. Please make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell for notifications. Right now in this market, the due diligence time period on offers is another way for agents to negotiate for their buyers to make their offer even more competitive. A lot of times in this market, you're looking at about a 10 to 14 day due diligence period. Anything above and beyond that time frame, you might not get your offer accepted by a seller. Of course, the listing agents are going to look at the price point, the seller contributions, the financing, but a lot of times in this market, the offers that you're going to receive on homes are going to be relatively the same. And so as an agent, when I'm presenting to my seller, I am going down to the due diligence time frame and seeing how competitive all the buyers are offering for that due diligence time frame. Right now, what I'm suggesting for my buyers to do is a 7-day due diligence period. It does mean that as an agent, I have to be on top of it and have an inspector lined up so we can get into the house as soon as possible and get that inspection report back and still have time for negotiations. So it's really important that if you aren't working with me or someone with our team, that you have an agent that has inspectors ready and available and that they are ready to move forward and quickly, and that your agent is ready to move forward with negotiations as soon as possible. From the seller's point of view, it does help having that competitive due diligence time period. It allows the transaction to move on from that first step on its trip to the closing table. Let's just walk through the due diligence time period and how I like to manage it for my buyers, and then I'll talk about how I like to manage it for my sellers. Obviously, the first step is to get the house under contract and binding. Typically, that next day is when your first due diligence day begins. So again, at that point, my team is scheduling the inspection to get in and get done as soon as possible so we can get the inspection report back. They're also alerting the seller of the inspection, getting that scheduled with them, and then we kind of sit back and let the inspector do their job. As soon as we get that inspection report back, which really is within a 24 to 48 hour time period, most of my inspectors are incredible and they really get it done quickly for us and get it turned around within that 24 hours, which makes my job as a buyer's agent a lot better because I can go straight into negotiations and we can get this locked up and on to the next step a lot faster. So once we get that inspection report back, we do go through and we look at every single line item on the inspection report. I then ask my buyers to go through the inspection report and number the items from their biggest concerns to their least concerns. I then go through and look at what they are asking to have done, and we discuss the importance of each item and kind of weigh them out for negotiations. Of course, most buyers want to have every single item on that inspection report repaired, but a lot of times that's just not going to happen. So again, it's really important for us to outline what is very important for the buyers to have done, as well as for the structural reasons of the home, of what really does need to have to get done versus what might be more of a wish list item of them getting done, such as updated countertops. Once we have that list of items narrowed down, I then go and organize them once again from biggest concern to least concern. That's just a personal preference that I use as an agent, but I will say as well as a listing agent, I do find that really helpful when I'm reviewing other amendment to address concerns from buyers. Once we are able to narrow down that list, I then take the list and I put it onto the amendment to address concerns paperwork. This is a document that we use to share with the sellers of homes what items we need to have repaired before we close on the home and should be covered by the seller. The key to this list is obviously we want to get as many repairs done as possible, but we don't want to ask for too much. And again, going back to what is needed to be done versus what are wish list items. Once we get that all tightened up, we send it over to the seller and they review it. At that point, it typically goes into negotiations. Very rarely does a seller agree to all items on the amendment to address concerns. At that point, myself and the listing agent go back and forth and we chat with our clients of what we can realistically get done on the amendment to address concerns. Once we find a middle ground, we then again get the list very clean and tidy and send it off for signatures. Keep in mind, when you are preparing an amendment to address concerns with your agent, there's a few items that really need to be on that amendment to address concern to protect both your buyer and your seller. One of the most important items to include on the amendment to address concern is when all these repairs need to be done by. A lot of agents will say they need to be done on or before closing. Well, what is before closing? Is that an hour before closing? Is that 5 minutes before closing? Is that 72 hours before closing? Again, it's very important to specify when these need to be done. The final item that I would include on the amendment to address concerns as a buyer is to request that the repairs be done by a licensed and professional vendor or contractor. I would also ask that any work orders or receipts for those repairs be sent to you prior to your final walkthrough or your completion date that is required on the amendment to address concerns. Typically, I say try to negotiate that all repairs on the amendment to address concern are finished by 3 business days before your closing date. It's not always going to happen, and a seller is not always going to agree to that, but it is a good starting point. Realistically, you're most likely going to come into agreement with a seller to have the repairs done within 2 days, sometimes 24 hours of closing date. Another reason why it's important to have all these repairs on the amendment to address concern finished within a day or 2 from closing is because you want to make sure that they are done before your final walkthrough. As a buyer, arriving to your final walkthrough and finding that all the repairs were not done and completed on time is incredibly upsetting, especially when you're so excited to get into your new home and to move in and start those memories there. So again, it's very important to set that completion date for the repairs on the amendment to address concerns during the due diligence time period. That way we are all setting each other up for success towards the end of the closing period before we get to the closing table. Now, from the seller's point of view, again, having a shorter due diligence period is a plus because you know that that buyer is working hard to get to the closing table. That means they're working hard to get through step 1, the due diligence time period, and on to the next step. So as a seller, seeing a shorter due diligence time period really shows the motivation that a buyer has to purchase a home. Once the inspection is done and you receive that first amendment to address concerns from the buyer, you might be a little overwhelmed by the amount of items on the amendment to address concerns. But keep in mind, this is a negotiation tool. You don't have to commit to all those repairs. You can choose not to commit to any of them. I don't know if I would suggest that unless you are selling the home strictly as is, because at the end of the day, you do want to sell your home. So it takes a little bit of giving to be able to take, and vice versa. So again, as a seller, work with your agent to go through the list and figure out which items really are necessary. Again, looking at the structural items versus the cosmetic items that the buyer is asking for. Once you have your amendment to address concerns, get working on them. Hire the contractor, get the vendors out there that you need, and get it done. So again, all in all, due diligence is so important because one, as a buyer, you're going to find out what items in the house need to repair. You're going to be able to negotiate repairs done or an adjusted price point for the home to purchase. For a seller, you get your home sold. Thank you so much for tuning in. I would love the opportunity to work with you and help you find a home or sell your home. Again, my name is Kristen Coleman and I'm with Georgia Perimeter Homes team and hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.